Let's talk about choosing a conflict pattern. So most games have conflicts. Enemies, puzzles, that sort of thing. I find that most games don't really put them together in a narratively coherent way, especially RPGs, where they just tend to be like a giant pile of whatever was in the monster manual. So I thought we could talk a little bit about conflict patterns, which is just a way to think about the pattern that a series of conflicts creates. If you know what you want, you can get it pretty easily. You don't have to struggle with it. You're going to have an easy time having these things flow well and support each other. Well, if you don't know what you want, they're just going to be a jumble, and they're not going to end up supporting each other, and you're going to have a narrative that feels very flat because nothing is building on top of anything else. I'll give you an example. You're making a computer RPG, and you've decided that your main enemy is these shape-shifting lizard folk. They can become anybody in town. They can look like anybody they want, and that's supposed to be a leg. It's fine. And so they keep turning into people from town. They keep turning into, the mayor or the guard captain, and then they'll do horrible things like kill people or steal things or burn places down or whatever. Now, obviously, the conflicts themselves, the fights, are going to have specific mechanics like ambushes, invisibility, poison, whatever. But above that, the pattern that these fights create in the narrative as they go on is one of distrust. Because these lizards can become anybody, you can't trust anybody. They could be your friend. One of your party members could have been replaced. How would you know? You can't trust anybody. And every time you get into a fight where these lizards have taken the form of somebody that you trust, or at least don't distrust, that gets hammered home even more. This is the conflict pattern. The shape-shifting lizard conflict is one of generating distrust. As you get more and more of these conflicts, you're going to trust your people less and less because the lizards keep taking them over. Now, if your story is about that lack of trust, then that could be very compelling. If you have a story about how, one of your party members never trusts anybody and one of your party members trusts too much and, you got to sort that out. And then at the end, it's all about, yeah, we can trust each other or whatever. You can sort that out. You can have a very compelling story about trust. If you don't know what you're doing and your story is actually about searching for 8 magical gems for an ancient crown, it's going to fall flat. These conflicts, these lizard folk, don't add to the story because they're a completely different topic. The ancient crown and the magical gems and the ancient ruins, those are a different conflict pattern. That conflict pattern would be one of being in awe of the ancients and their accomplishments and their huge ruins, and you're really looking into these magical ancient times with the cool libraries and stuff, and that would be kind of an awe-inspiring pattern. You could play it a couple of different ways, right? It's not like it's hard-coded here, but none of that is distrust. Distrust has nothing to do with it. These are ancient ruins. There's not a whole lot to trust or distrust. So you can see how those two conflict patterns just don't overlap. The kinds of things we do while we're in these ruins and the kinds of things we do when the lizards are attacking are just completely unrelated. And so we could say that these conflict patterns are orthogonal. They're not building on each other. They're not a very good match. Now, if we wanted to build a game that was all about the majesty of ancient magics, then there are a lot of other ways we could do it. Let's say that we wanted to build the same kind of game, but we were willing to give up on our lizard plotline. Now, the reason the lizard plotline might be there in the first place is because we want to have enemies threatening our towns. Not necessarily threatening to wipe them off the map, but threatening the security of our towns. We don't want to have like this perfectly safe home base that we always go back to. Well, we could just make it so that there are some internal factions or something similar. And some of those could be like directly linked to the ancients or, being mind controlled by one of the ancients or something like that. But the point here is that as we explore all of these ancient ruins and we find cool ancient shit, we could easily find some very cool ancient shit, like a flying castle or a giant magic golem. And then those things would get brought back to the town, and then, oh, it looks like Doug really liked the magic golem more than he should have, and he activated it, and now he and the magic golem are rampaging around, and, you got the same kind of fight category as you would if there was a lizard invasion, but now it's thematically relevant because the majesty of the ancients is right there. That's the giant golem. That's him. He's the majesty of the ancients. Can you take him on? Oh, it's hopeless. You need to go and find the power core in Nostiragoth or whatever. By choosing conflict patterns that reinforce each other rather than negate each other, we can get a coherent final vision. We can get something that works as the story advances. And keep in mind, we're not choosing just one conflict pattern for the entire game, because as we go through the game, in theory, our arc should advance. Where we are in the world should advance. For example, if we do go with that evil shape-shifting lizard plotline, then we would want this plotline to advance over the course of the game. So at the beginning, it's like, it's so weird and creepy and scary. And then as we move on, we start to be like, okay, we've got to take some countermeasures. Maybe we can take the fight to them. Oh, can we disguise ourselves as a lizardman? Oh, is one of the lizardmen friendly? We can try and figure out ways to crack their half of this equation and get some of that fear onto their side. And you can see that as we advance through the game, we're changing exactly how we view the threat and how we view trust, and we're trying to figure out how we can build trust on our side, and maybe how we can break down the trust and use their own weapons on their side. And we're also gaining power, like just leveling up. And that is also a factor, because we might have a hard time fighting off one small platoon, one small group near the beginning of the game. But as we enter the mid-game, oh, you're a lizard? Oh, you brought 500 lizard friends? Fireball, 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 fireball. We're done. And you can see how that's a radically different feeling than it would have been at the beginning of the game. So you need to choose how these things evolve, how these things emerge, so that they can support each other and chain together. As I'm saying, this is just a way to think about things. It's not the right way to do things. It's not the only way to do things. But whenever I look at a game and the conflicts don't build on each other, that's just a huge loss. Because your conflicts are the main way you talk to the player. They're the thing that the player has to pay the most attention to. So they should build on each other. That's it. Pretty simple thing. Bye.